And thanks so much for watching Morning Live on Christmas Eve. Now, the Department of Labour has published in the Government Gazette their intention to grant protection for freelancers in film, television and theatre industries. And this stems from veteran actress Vatiswa Ndara's open letter to the Minister of Arts and Culture in October this year, which sparked a national conversation on the treatment of South African actors. Actor and chairman of the South African Guild of Actors, Devnarain, joins us now to talk more about this situation. Welcome and thanks for coming through on Christmas Eve.
Yes, wonderful to be here. Thank you.
And I say it, flippantly, thanks for coming through on Christmas Eve, but for freelancers, it's par for the cause.
We don't know Christmas Day from Christmas Eve to Diwali or a Sunday morning. It's all the same to us, really. And I think that's just the nature of the work. We've always just applied ourselves to what needs to be done, whether it's a holiday, whether it's after hours. For us, if we're not working, we're not earning.
And before we hone in on the specific issue that was sparked by Vatiswa Ndara's open letter, I think for a lot of the time, people don't quite understand, what actually goes on behind the scenes with freelancers, be they actors, be they presenters like us on radio or television. Yeah. People don't understand what it entails.
Let's just talk about the depth of that misunderstanding, Sakina, because for years, and I'm a professional actor now for more than 20 years, and the number of times I have had so-called legal experts, labor law specialists come to tell me as a freelancer, but no, you're covered by labor law, you can get unemployment, you'll have the right to sick leave, of course you have all these benefits that accrue to you simply because you're working on the set. And finally, I believe this is the big moment, the bombshell that's been dropped by the Department of Labour that actually puts things in perspective to say that no, freelancers are not protected by labor law. And in fact, we have been most exposed by the lack of statutory protection. And all we've ever had is the benefits and the protections that come by virtue of the contract we sign. And those are never in our favour.
They never are, because they're usually in favour of the employer.
Yes.
And you literally are here, no work, no pay. And often people say, don't you get tired? Don't you take leave? But you don't work, you don't get paid. It's as simple as that.
That's the absolute truth. And in fact, in the world of work, we are known as atypical workers. And people are starting to understand the difference between employer, employee, master-slave relationship, freelancer, independent contractor, typical and atypical workers. And all these different terms are now being unpacked because globally there is a massive trend towards people working in their own time, working for themselves. And it means they're no longer going into these bricks and mortar corporate office parks where they're, checking in and clocking in their card to make sure that they're in by 8 and out by 5 or whatever it might be. That's no longer the case. It's changing, and I think this is part of the effort by the Department of Labour to acknowledge the fact that just because you are not described typically as an employee, does that mean you should not be protected by labour laws generally?
So speaking to this issue now, where the Department of Labour has gazetted that they intend to publish some protection for freelancers, do we know exactly what the parameters, the scope of that is at this point?
I think it's part of our homework, and especially the South African Guild of Actors will be looking to engage the Minister to understand exactly which aspects of the entire suite of labour laws might be brought to apply. Because, for example, you could be talking about the Labour Relations Act, and the LRA is an important piece of legislation because that basically allows people to create unions, to engage in collective bargaining through a system of equal and democratic representation on the work floor. And that is a huge advantage. In the acting world, this is already what exists as an industry standard at any major performance industry around the world, except in South Africa. Now, if we are going to adopt the LRA and draw it into our freelance world, for the very first time, we will have the right to bargain collectively. And that's besides basic conditions of employment, which then includes the suite of other things, the maternity leave, overtime, sick leave, family responsibility leave and all those other things. So we have to be very clear in terms of what the minister has to say. Which laws do you refer to when you say we are now protected by labour laws?
And then there's, of course, the issue of taxation.
Yes.
For freelancers. And one of the issues that became very pertinent during Vatiswa's open letter was how much people think freelancers are paid, but forgetting that that covers everything that you have to take care of that other employees, full-time employees, would have covered by, their employment contract, and they would have contributions from the employer.
Tax is one of the biggest elements, and in fact, as a freelancer, what many people may not realize is that during the tax season, a freelancer is able to go and claim back for expenses that they incurred in pursuit of their income. So as an actor, I might want to look at what are the items of wardrobe I might have used. I look at the posting, packaging I might have used. I could look at my data costs, fuel costs. I could take all of that and I could say, this quantum should be able to be claimed back from SARS because this is what I expended while I was engaged in pursuing my income. So we would like to know now, being protected by labour law, do we still qualify for that kind of rebate? And if we don't, then obviously there has to be some kind of compensation to make up for that, because truly as a freelancer, you look forward to making that claim every year from SARS because your tax code as a freelancer is very different to your tax code as an employee. And if we are going to change them, freelancers will be losing a huge advantage that they've had traditionally by virtue of being called a freelancer.
And of course, as you say, it's going to be interesting to see what is covered, how things actually change, because you look at long-running shows now like Isidingo, and where people have been laid off, and what happens to them? Again, the rights of actors. If you've acted on this particular set for 20 years, what happens to you after 20 years?
Those are exactly the kinds of questions we need to be posing to the minister. For example, if we say that there will be labour laws that apply and rules regarding termination of contracts will then apply, we have to find out, will an actor who is engaged in a one-year contract, and that was my case in particular, I had a one-year contract which was renewed 14 times. I was very lucky. So I was on the show for 15 years. But in that time, it meant that the only way this contract could be terminated is through the expiry of the contract. It had to have prescribed after the year, and then the production company would decide if they want me back or not. But now, if I'm going to be considered to be an employee, can I be retrenched? And if I am retrenched, what does that mean? Am I able to earn a package from that? And these are some of the questions we will have to explore, because it's, as much as we have created a massive opportunity for protection, we also have to understand that it's not going to be a direct fit. If we're taking labour laws and we're superimposing it over our industry, we have to understand exactly what are those contact points that make it work and what are those contact points that won't. For example, if we're talking about minimum wage, which now applies to the performance industry, should I, as an actor of 20 years experience, go in and sign a contract that allows me to claim only minimum wage? Should I not be allowed to negotiate a contract that allows me to earn something more? Says Vatiswa, for example, shouldn't she be allowed to negotiate a higher rate? Why should she settle for minimum wage? And these are the questions that we must now ask the minister. Hopefully we'll get some clarity on that.
And there are so many more questions. I'm sure, freelancers chomping at the bit just watching and listening to you discuss, some of these issues, because, as you say, looking at what the Labour Relations Act states and the sort of expectations that are created, whereby your one-year contract is renewed for 14 years annually. But where does that leave you in terms of trying to acquire property, assets, because they would ask you, are you employed full-time, part-time? So if you're trying to get a bond, how do you go about that?
It's one of our biggest concerns as SAGA, because for many years we have been trying to work with financial institutions, insurance and medical aid companies to say to them, just because I am a freelancer and I've signed a contract for this year, why should I not qualify for your financial services, your investment packages, loans, home loans, car finance? That's an entire suite of financial services that are not being made available to freelancers simply because I can't show them that I am earning money every month. So obviously when it comes to financial services, there are risks involved, and insurance companies and banks want to try and mitigate that risk as much as possible. Although what it has created in effect is that freelancers are unable to plug into the economy as a whole. And we are hoping now that with some kind of protection, allowing us protection under labor laws, there's going to be some stability so that it's not just going to be a simple matter of, Sakina, I'm tired of your makeup, you need to leave this floor right now. And that is no longer going to happen. There's going to be some kind of protection. And with that protection, hopefully it then allows us to go into the banking institutions, into the medical aid, insurance institutions to say, I am in employment and I'm in a secure space. Allow me to plug into this economy because I pay tax anyway. And with that, can I at least earn some benefits through your financial institutions that's going to give me and my family some security?
And of course, Jack, you at the South African Guild of Actors, but will you be trying to do something more extensively with other freelancers in this particular space to just make sure that the conversations happen and you know, there are perhaps workshops in the lead up to this legislation being enacted?
As I'm saying this, I'm going to have lots of nodding heads with the crew on this floor right now, because my biggest concern is that there are groups of people, and we're talking about tens of thousands of people working in our South African film, television and theatre industries right now, especially among crew, who have not created organizations to represent their voice. So I want to make sure then that we've got directors and producers, content creators. We want to see broadcasters sitting in on these conversations. And when we talk about, you know, Saga, it's fortunate that we were able to create this organization 10 years ago. And we've obviously gained momentum. We are able to sit and talk to people like Vatiswa Ndara and collaborate and make sure that we dovetail our efforts towards the same goals. But that doesn't mean that everyone is protected. And it doesn't mean that everyone who is working in this industry has a representative body, organization, or a voice that's going to help to secure their rights when it comes to presenting a submission in Parliament, for example. So this is what our work has got to be about as Saga, is connecting those different elements so that even though you might not have an organization, it is your democratic right to be represented and that your voice must be heard. And because I've been involved in this industry for so long, it's a personal interest of mine to connect with these people, including the radio presenters, the stand-up comedians, all these people who are part of the industry, in part of the broader industry. I want to make sure that they have some kind of representation, even if it means creating the connections, so that when it comes time to make those representations, their voices must be heard.
Well, looking forward to see how this develops, and thank you so much to actor and chairman of the SA Guild of Actors, Jack Devnarain. The Department of Labour has published in the Government Gazette their intention to grant protection for freelancers in the film, television and theatre industries. We're going to take a break. On the other side of that, in fact,